Well, let's get started. Josh, what do you say?
Let's do it.
We've been working on this for weeks to get this going. I was just thinking about this last night, and I'm so excited to finally be here to get to share this with everyone. And so we're really excited to dive into exactly as the cover says, hit your investment audience right between the eyes and through the heart, and at the same time without having to have a huge Super Bowl budget. And so you guys ready? Hyped up?
Let's do this.
All right, let's do it. So we know we all like prizes, Josh, right? What do we have for folks today?
Oh yeah, so for sure the kind of want to just thank you for attending. And really the number one thing that people get wrong when they do programmatic is the audience. Making sure that they're targeting the right people and getting their message in front of the right people. So we're going to give you the custom audiences, the data sources we use, and cater just to your business and based on our experience, based on the millions in ad spend. So basically anyone who stays till the end, we're going to offer that to you. In fact, what's the value of that? Well, I love this. The Google Knowledge Graph, when you ask the question, what's the downfall of programmatic advertising? It notes you're targeting the wrong audience. That a programmatic campaign can quickly fall flat with the wrong audience. So if you don't get your ad in front of the right people, your costs are going to soar, your ROI is going to plummet, and you're going to go, well, this didn't work. Well, it didn't work because you targeted the wrong audience. So if you hang on to the end, for every single person listening, we're going to give you, if you give us your info, we'll show you 3 programmatic audiences that we will customize for your business and send back to you. Whether you end up wherever you want to use those audiences, we'll at least show you these are the audiences that will help you succeed and save you a ton of time.
Yeah, perfect. And we know that's key. And thanks, Josh, for welcoming everybody. A couple, just real quick logistics things that we want to make sure. So we're going to have, the chat open a little bit later so that people can drop us questions, and that'll be moderated. We'll also have a Q&A there towards the end, but for now we do have everybody on mute, and so we can just kind of roll right through the slides. So a little bit about us. Josh and I will be presenting to you today. Josh, you want to let the folks know a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the VP of Search Engine Marketing and Programmatic at Zero Company. I've been with Zero Company since 2002. That's always easier to remember for me since my son is 18 and that was the year he was born. So I always remember that. Every year, typically I manage right now about $4 million annually in ad spend. About 75% of that is related to investment services. So that's definitely a niche I'm extremely familiar with as far as compliance and such. Consider myself an expert in Google pay-per-click, Bing, Facebook, and programmatic. I definitely am a strong believer in the fact that digital marketing is really part science, part art, and really it's important to be able to blend the two to get the right results. But really my joy, the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning and in front of my computer and that I love, is helping a business grow to their potential. Whether that's a small mom and pop business, whether that's a giant corporation, it doesn't matter to me. I love helping a business go from point A to point B, developing that strategy and then executing it. That's the fun part for me.
That's a big differentiator for sure, and it comes through. I did want to plug in, Josh, here a little bit about Zero before jumping into my background. So a question for the audience: when was pay-per-click established? What would you say? What year? Well, if you said 1998, you'd be absolutely correct. In fact, it was first started by a company some of us may have heard of if you're old enough, I guess, right? GoTo.com, which if you visit today, is now GoToWebinar and GoToMeeting. But that is exactly the history and the experience that Zero Company goes back to. And as far as the folks here at the agency, the continuity that they bring and the experience is bar none. And so really you're in good hands. And they've got an incredible understanding through all of the waves and different tools and technologies that were launched in this space along the way. Just a little bit about me. So I've been at this for a little bit more than 15 years as a VP of marketing, and during those times sitting in the same seat that many of you are in, having to be responsible for budget, having to come up with campaigns, designing the funnel, making sure that marketing ROI was being proven, and then setting up lead generation and allocations of that budget to suffice that. And then as far as this space goes with the investment management financial services area, I'm an alumni of PIMCO and Investors Business Daily. I had the fortune of rubbing elbows with a few of these gentlemen, Bill Gross, the Bond King, Mohammed Alarian, who was our CEO for many of those years, and then even the transition over to CIO for Dan Iveson. Really having the opportunity to see this organization grow. We went from 250 billion in assets under management at that time to $1.5 trillion. And being on the field on the marketing team, knowing what it took to generate that growth, and then also experiencing a lot of the really hard lessons through, at that point in time, a lot of what we now call traditional forms of marketing, developing that content, developing that thought leadership, pushing out our social media updates and email and newsletters, and even then working with many of the intermediaries and the wealth managers and trying to coach them on our products and help them understand some of the differentiating points. And I think we've all been in those seats where we're sponsoring events, or we're sending clients to entertain them at different events, and you just ask, where is the ROI, right? What do we get from that? And so learning many of these lessons the hard way, and then now seeing really the capabilities of programmatic advertising and what it can do. So we have a poll actually for our audience. We want to know, and we're going to launch the poll here in just a second. We want to know how many of you have heard of programmatic advertising before, just to make sure that we can adjust. And feel free to respond here with the questionnaire. And we'll just give it a second, and then we're going to end this, and then we'll show everyone the results. Okay, very nice.
Yeah, that helps. A few people.
Yeah, that really helps. Right. I mean, rule number one, right, Josh, of presenting is know our audience.
That's the rule number one of programmatic too.
There you go. Exactly. So like we said, and everyone can see my screen, right?
Yep.
We're back to the presentation. Okay, perfect. Like we said, marketing is hard. You have this struggle to stay top of mind. We have to prove that what we're doing is working. We've got the product proliferation. There's a complexity in this marketplace. There's a lot that as a marketer we have to do, which is not just execute. And so for me, this is kind of a funny story, but was an absolute eye opener when I first started to hear about programmatic. It's something that happened to me personally. And so, of course, our family, we do like to enjoy wine every once in a while, as I'm sure many of those in our audience do as well. And so I had gone to our local Albertsons, picked up, their 6 bottles of wine deal, and bought this particular bottle of Josh Cab. And through some of the information that was displayed there, in my purchase data, I all of a sudden, a couple of days later, started to see ads for that exact same bottle of Josh wine. But what was really interesting is they weren't asking me to buy, or they weren't offering me some deal. They were starting to show me what I could do to pair this bottle and what it would go really well with. And I thought that was just amazing, and how we can just bring that back to this audience, right? And being able to know what your target audience is doing and being able to deliver them a very specific message. It's just incredible the level that advertising has gone to, and not just being able to identify them, but then also being able to target them. So, Josh, how does this actually happen?
Yeah, that's a perfect example because they knew you had already purchased that. Probably the way that happened is, if you use your rewards card at the supermarket, which we usually almost all do, they knew that you had made that purchase. So you go into a bucket as an audience of a bucket of purchasers of that specific brand of wine. And then once you're in that bucket, now they can market to you via display online, video online, connected TV, even radio ads, etc., so that you are in that bucket. In fact, in this slide, I think is a perfect indicator of how well programmatic works because, as you notice there, that target right above that one house. And I've got some stories later, actually, I know we're going to get into. They're going to show you crystal clear just how you can get to target that one house in that one neighborhood. So it's really a really cool medium.
You'll want to stick around for those stories because not only are they amazing, but they're also quite funny. So if we had to define programmatic advertising as we saw, the understanding of these terms with our poll, Josh, how would you define that?
Yeah, so programmatic advertising is the automated buying and selling of online advertising based on pinpoint targeted audiences. So, for example, in traditional advertising, you might say, I want to target everyone who reads this publication, right? Whether that's online or in print. Or maybe you say, I want to target everyone who visits a certain website or anyone who watches a specific TV show. But with programmatic advertising, we're actually targeting a subset of each of those traditional audiences. So we're showing our ads only to the individual people who exactly match our target user. So instead of targeting a location for an ad, we're targeting the person, no matter where they might be, no matter what medium they're using, we're targeting that person.
I think to underscore that point even more, Josh, when you're saying that it's the exact device, the particular site, at the moment of time, and even the location, say on that digital real estate that you can plug into. And so there's many ways of doing this. What are at least some of the 5 levers that we use?
Yeah, so here's just some of the levers we can pull with programmatic. Certainly apps, or your phone goes with you everywhere. And advertisers, we leverage this all the time. There's a lot that can be pulled from that to tell a story about a person. I know we're going to cover that a little bit more later.
Right.
We're going to talk a little bit more about timing and how to break that cold to close timing myth, especially in the financial industry. Cost, how to pinpoint the right investor without a Super Bowl budget. And CTV is probably the most fun part of programmatic advertising, to me at least. And then data, because what's cool about programmatic is we have so much data at our disposal. So whatever our initial baseline is, we can always optimize. We can always go up. And as marketers, that's exciting, right? I live on data. So there's all these levers that we can pull to improve results. And some of these levers result in very small, minute changes. Some have very large repercussions. So it's important to know which levers to pull when. Because there are so many levers, because there is so much data, that can make it tricky. But once you understand those levers, we can get so much more bang for your buck.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to get into a case study here, right?
There, a real one, yeah, to really show that this is real.
Yeah. So why do we say this? You see that image there, I think is perfect, of just all those levers and gears. And again, as a marketer, that's what makes it fun for me and fun for our team. But in this particular case study, financial-based client, site traffic was low, costs were increasing. We took over the programmatic campaigns from another agency, and then we decided we let the campaigns run for a month so that we could get fresh data within our account and see what we got. And then what's really fascinating is we saw that data, we started pulling some levers. By the end of the second month, we saw a 31% increase in click-through rate. We saw a 39% decrease in cost per click, and we saw a 39% increase in traffic with the same budget. So, in fact, actually, even what's really interesting, yeah, let's go to the 1 year later results there. So a year later, we are seeing a 334% increase in CTR or click-through rate and a 65% decrease in cost per click. So again, even more traffic, even with the same budget. And that goes back to what I'd said just a slide or two ago about we establish a baseline and then we start pulling levers and improve on that. So I thought it was interesting when I went back and looked at this as we were putting this slide together, that I believe our budget that month when we looked back was $66,000 in that first and second month. Mm-hmm. Now, without the adjustments we made, if they had wanted to get the same amount of traffic in month 2 as what we got them, they would have had to spend $108,000.
$108,000.
Yeah,
that's nearly
$108,000 instead of the 66 they spent. Wow. Just because we got 39% more traffic with the same budget. Wow. So in just 1 month, the resulting savings paid for a year and a half of our management fee. So it very quickly paid for itself, which was really cool to see.
So Josh, you telling me that this is a no-brainer?
Yes, it's a no-brainer that if you're pulling the right levers, you really can see these phenomenal results, once you establish that baseline.
Right, and I think it's also important for us, everyone to understand, we're not telling you move your entire budget over to programmatic and then that's it, right? There are different ways that you need to leverage these, and certainly search has its place. The Google environment has its place as well as YouTube, but it's kind of this mix, and I think it involves a conversation and some strategic thinking. So for our audience, you've seen the example and the story through the Josh Wine. There's this real case study. The question then for you is, are you ready to be a digital marketing superhero? And what do we mean by that, Josh? What are we going to cover today?
Yeah, so today we're gonna talk about 3 secrets and kind of offer some transparency to the programmatic world, which often is pretty opaque. So we're going to talk about how we can hit our investment audience right between the eyes and through the heart. Three secrets here. First, how to break through the noise, how to get the attention of your custom or your specific audience. Number 2 is breaking the cold to close myth, right? A lot of times we have this thinking in the financial industry, or we've encountered this, that it's going to take months of hitting this person over and over with our message before they decide to make an ETF or a mutual fund purchase, etc. That's not true. We're going to show you how you do that with programmatic. And then 3, we're going to show how you don't need a Super Bowl budget to get in front of millions of people. So let's jump right into it. So going back, right, as we've said, the toughest thing for us as marketers, we lay awake at night, we've got that angst in our stomachs, is how do we get to these audiences? So if we're trying to target high net worth investors, active traders, investment professionals, or even institutional investors, where are they? How do we do that? And then can we prove that our activities are working? So tons of noise in the marketplace. Advisors are being hit with messages. Investors are being hit with messages. Let's just define what we mean, by that noise. So the competition in the space, we understand it from having worked in the vertical for a long period of time, is there's a lot of product, right? The number one thing that we see here from the chart that's indicated according to Statistica is there's almost 8,000 different mutual funds in this space. And then on top of the proliferation of those products, there's different vehicles that have come along. As we can see here, by last count in 2019, that there were nearly 3,000 different ETFs. So again, an ETF being like a mutual fund, but trades like a stock on an exchange. There have been this huge ramp up. And if we look at where the assets are going in the space, we can clearly see as well that they are flowing into the ETF vehicle. But when we get to complexity, if we look at ETFdatabase.com, not only are there 3,000 different ETFs, but there's 10 different categories. And that we mean by that equities and stocks and commodities and currencies, right?
But then even if we look within each of those buckets, for example, let's just take the fixed income market. In the bond market, there's 13 different types of bond ETFs, from broad to emerging markets to corporates to high yield. And on the equity side, it's even worse. There's 36 different types, and them being small cap, mid cap, large cap. If you want an internet or a technology only ETF. So it is really difficult, right, to get the attention. And then the advent, really more recently, what we're showing here in this chart, was beginning in about 2014. A lot of equity started to go into the private markets. And so on average, since about 2014, we've seen anywhere from 1,200 to about 1,600 private equity deals per year. And the impact of that is that it takes assets out of the other traditional forms or vehicles and now are being allocated to this new alternative. So as far as competition being steep, there being a lot of noise, without a doubt, this vertical is being hit by it. And so where we want to focus for the next few minutes is really in the denominator, or the bottom part of this equation, is on the audience. So Josh, can you help us? How do we break through this noise that we've articulated in the marketplace?
Right. So this gets into our first secret of how to break through that noise, how to get the attention of our audience. And with programmatic, we can target them in ways we never could before. So one of our favorite tools to use certainly is targeting people based on the apps that are on their phone. So we can look and we can say, hey, I want to target people that have, for example, a trading app on their phone. I want to target people that are using Thinkorswim from TD Ameritrade. Mm-hmm. Target people that are using E-Trade or Acorn or Robinhood or Schwab or Chase or whoever they're using. Target those people based on the apps that are on their phones. And then once we know they're in that bucket, again, we can target them not even in that app or maybe on their phone, but also through all those other channels that we just talked about, audio, video, TV, etc. Or we can target people, we can create combinations and say, well, I only want to target people that are high net worth and have those apps. Or I only want to target people of a certain age who are high net worth and have those apps, and also are regular visitors to Investors Business Daily or Bloomberg or watching Bloomberg or Market Watch, etc. So we can create this custom proprietary audience, really, of this blend, so that we make sure we're targeting the exact person right, your exact right target audience, depending on who it is that is the right target for your product.
Right. So then, a question for our listeners, right? Is this not just eye-opening, right? This stuff is so cool, and it just removes so much of that frustration that we've experienced in the past from other marketers. So there's even more ways, right, Josh, that we can continue to break through this noise if we're, say, trying to reach a wealth manager or a financial advisor network.
Yeah, we can even do it based on occupation. So again, we can say, well, I only want to target people who have a title of a financial planner, or they're a financial services business executive, or they're a financial services business owner, or they work at Raymond James, or they work at Wells Fargo, or whatever you want to target. If we can even pick specific locations, and actually even this doesn't work quite as well in the COVID world, but we can even geofence locations and say, well, I want to target people specifically based on where they've been. If they've entered this geofence area, say at a trade show, I want to target anyone who has attended this trade show, even if I didn't go there, even if I didn't present, but especially if you did. Anyone who has entered this location, I can now target them via a video, a display ad, a TV ad, etc. So tons of ways.
And to reinforce, the audience may be aware that, hey, you can do some geofencing and send some SMS texts and that kind of thing. But what we're talking about here is going back to the device, the site, the location on that particular site, and then the right time. So it's just a way more sophisticated way. And you may, as an audience member, maybe thinking, hey, I can do this on LinkedIn, right? Like I can target based on profession, or I can target based on a geography. But what this is really doing is taking it out of just the sphere of LinkedIn, right? Because you've got to be in LinkedIn in order to do those things. This allows us to then go really to the open web and do many of the same things that you're familiar with, or that you know how to do in LinkedIn. Well, now it opens up a whole new channel and avenue. And one point I do want to emphasize is some of these apps are made just for advisors, and the fact that an advisor would have that on their phone would allow us to get that granular and target those that we know are advisors and are using advisor only apps. So I'm going to move pretty quickly through this example, because we're about halfway through our slides and we're a little bit over time. But I love the story over at Acorns and what they're doing. And they recently launched their early app. So as an example, for somebody like an Acorns, they are targeting parents essentially with their early app to get them investing in the future of their kids' education, or just for their future wealth and health and being. So one option, if I was Acorns, I could target a campaign just to moms. And one of the interesting things about programmatic is that by excluding some audiences, it's actually a little bit cheaper to exclude versus include. So if we wanted to, we could run a campaign towards moms by excluding the dads. Nothing bad there about dads, but we could even then get into the ages, or even some of the life events. For example, they may have children that are in certain age ranges now that are 0 to 3 or 5 to 8. It's just incredible the level of sophistication that they have. And if we added in some of those other characteristics, the Venn diagram then starts to come together, and we could target those that have the SoFi app that we know are comfortable with investing via apps or in the digital space. So just to recap, when we're talking about breaking through the noise, we break through that secret by combining the targeting characteristics, by reaching across the open web and going outside some of the walled gardens, and then leveraging the power of cross-device. So for our second myth that we want to help everyone understand today, this cold to close. And to understand this, it may be best to illustrate what we mean by cold to close. So as we know in retail, the holiday season is a time period of very high conversion because there's a lot of activity. Well, in the financial services and in the investment management space, we have seen the exact same activity. And so we'll want to show you an example of how we can execute in these types of high traffic events.
Yeah, so it is important for us, even in the to be nimble and to be aggressive. So okay, so let's see here. When we jump there, what we want to look at here is that green line that indicates the holdings for this particular fund. And what we did in this case is we saw a spike in interest in Google Trends and Google searches related to this fund. And so when we saw that, we cranked up the volume on our programmatic campaign. So we already had our audiences, we already had everything ready to go. Once we saw that spike, we were ready to take off. And what happened as soon as we increased our advertising activity? Well, you can see there that green line that indicates the holdings. They were going up a little bit, mostly pretty flat. But then we jumped up our ad spend, targeting our specific audience, and suddenly those holdings started to go up, right? And so we saw that, and then you can see that bubble there that indicates the end of the increased activity. We saw interest starting to wane, so we scaled back the ad spend, and sure enough, we saw that the holdings kind of leveled out a little bit. But that is exactly the power of programmatic, is we can see these trends in Google, and then we can apply that to programmatic. We already have our perfect audience. We push the product, etc., and we see holdings for that ETF can quickly go up because they are making those decisions, right at that moment.
Yeah. If we just take a little bit of a macro view of it,
Yeah.
you can see from this chart just how dramatic that change?
Yeah, holdings were pretty flat for about a year, but then we turned on our programmatic ads. Bam, we see what happened. We saw this, it's a more dramatic spike when you look at a longer term over the course of the last year or so. And again, that's just targeting at the right time with the right audience.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? So to summarize this cold to close myth being debunked, it's the fact that you can identify certain spikes in the activity and increase your spend at that point in time and get a better ROI out of it. So now we want to run our next poll. Then Josh, you want to really dig in a little deep here. And maybe while we're running this poll, if you've got a couple stories that you'd like to share related to programmatic.
You know me, I've always got stories, but to me, that's the fun part. I always love that like eye-opening moment of with people when they realize, oh, you know, what was actually happening. So this was even just not that long ago. A few weeks ago, I'm walking my dog, walk past my neighbor. They're sitting in the on the porch, and we're just chit-chatting across the fence or whatnot. And they were referencing a show they were watching on Hulu. And I said, oh yeah, no, we watched that same show. And then the wife says, oh, aren't you just sick and tired? Can you believe how often we see an ad for that pillow, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, right. I've never seen that ad. And she's like, how's that possible if we're watching the same show? And I explained to her, well, exactly how it's possible is you are, for whatever reason, they believe you are their target audience. So here we are next door to each other, and we're seeing completely different ads during the same TV show. Right. So she's seeing this pillow ad over and over. I'm seeing completely different ads during the exact same show because we're in a different bucket. I'm a different audience. So that to me, that was kind of eye-opening to her that like, wait, how are we seeing different commercials? Well, that's the way programmatic and CTV advertising works with streaming.
Without a doubt, right? Without a doubt. It's just so funny, and the occurrences of those just happen more and more. Right?
Oh yeah. And then I don't know if we have. Oh, do we have another?
Yeah, we have our poll running here. Let's see.
Oh, it's still running. Okay, cool. Well, that's going to. I mean, again, the stories are endless. Like the types of targeting we see. I mean, even sometimes my wife is surprised when stuff happens, but now she's attuned to it. So she's always like, wait, how did I get in that bucket? Why are they showing me that ad? And then you start figuring out, oh yeah, no, I was on their website. Now I'm seeing this CTV ad, etc. It's kind of fun.
For sure. I mean, and this is just going to continue to get even more sophisticated and targeted. So this is interesting, Josh. The results we've got kind of a very varied audience. Some that just are the lone soldier when it comes to digital marketing, and others who do have a sizable amount of individuals focusing on digital marketing. And I think that's the trend that we've continued to see is as that digital marketing bucket gets larger and larger, we start to see more of the resources also present within the group. So I think we want to run our other poll before we jump into the budget piece. Let's go ahead and do that, run our third poll to try to find out exactly where everybody is when it comes to their budget. So if you can, for our audience, let us know, what is your average annual digital marketing investment today?
Well, that's running out. I can never resist an opportunity to tell another story. So this is one this literally just happened maybe a couple weeks ago. I'm sitting on my laptop, my wife's watching a show, and some ad played. I wasn't even really paying attention. My wife says, oh, wow, that was a really interesting TV ad. Again, streaming, connected TV. Oh, wow, that was a really interesting ad. And I'm like, what? I didn't see it. And she's like, oh, no, you should look it up. Okay. So I look up the ad. Accidentally, I click on the Spanish language version of the ad.
Oh, geez.
So now this Spanish video is playing on my computer, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. Okay, whatever. And then I go and find the right one. All right. Maybe 30 minutes, an hour later, suddenly my wife starts seeing Spanish language commercials running on the TV. So that fast, I was put in this bucket of Spanish language household. We don't speak a word of Spanish other than, a couple years in high school, maybe. That's about it for me. But yeah, so suddenly we're in this bucket, and it was kind of funny actually, because she was pretty irritated. Like, really? Now I'm going to start seeing these because you clicked on something by mistake? And I'm like, well, yeah, you are. For a little bit, we'll be in this bucket, and we'll start seeing these Spanish language ads because they think that we're now a Spanish language household, at least temporarily.
A cruel way.
So it's kind of funny when stuff like that happens and you get put in this advertising bucket. But you can see how it should work, right? It should work that if I'm watching Spanish language content, I would want to see Spanish language advertisements. So you can see how kind of that would work. But that's just one of the fun, one of the funny things about programmatic, and again, how fast you can get put into that bucket because that data is grabbed so quickly.
So just to run the results here real quick, Josh, we've got, I think, an audience who at this point in time is, probably on the, smaller side in terms of ad range. But the important thing, and what we want to get into now, is you really don't need to have this enormous budget when you're running a programmatic campaign. So let's dive into that next and talk about why you don't need a Super Bowl budget to get in front of millions. So, question here for our audience. This is going back to this past February, our Super Bowl in 2020. What would you say, or what do you think it would take to run a 30-second spot during the Super Bowl? You can type it here, just right into the chat. Just what do you think it would cost to run a 30-second spot? What are some guesses? See a few people typing. Okay, 3 million. It's pretty close. 2 million, $1.5 million, $500,000. So the number, as reported by CBS, was almost over $5.5 million, $5.6 million. And as we know, Josh, typically for these, you don't run just one of them, right? You'll usually run, say, 3 or 4. So by comparison, we want to go through an example here with you of just how varied the budgets can be and how you can focus. So by illustration, the large blue circle is the Super Bowl budget, $22.4 million. But if you really want to get to just a particular audience within that Super Bowl viewership, you can kind of hone that in. So if it's okay, Josh, I can just kind of quickly run through. So let's say from our poll, we saw some have about a $500,000 spent annually, and if we just took on average a $4 per click cost and divided that into the $500,000 annual budget, well, we could generate in the area of 125,000 clicks, right? Just for easy math, taking that $500,000 divided by the $4. And the important part is this is just from your select audience. It's that dark blue circle, not the big light blue circle. And even then, we could, on average, show anywhere from 3 ads, for a couple hours. Maybe it's, 5 ads for 3 hours, depending on what ratio we may come to. And if we just took a conversion rate of 1% from all of those clicks, the 125,000, well, you would generate 1,250 new investors. And if we just took that, and multiplied this by some account size, those new clients that were driven from this, if their average account size was just 12,000, and we know, we understand that may be a small account size, but just the power with that $500,000 spend, turning that into $15 million in new AUM. And if we,
I saw people that had smaller budgets too. Okay, knock a 0 off of that, right? Let's say your budget is only $50,000 annually. That's fine. Knock a 0 off of that. you suddenly have just generated with that 50,000, maybe 1.5 million in AUM, or maybe if larger accounts, maybe it is, over 6 million in AUM. So the power there is pretty obvious.
And I know, Josh, too, from one of the ETFs that you recently worked on in the launch, we had about a 5x return, right?
Yeah, it's about 5 times this. So, and that was a launch from zero, which is really hard to do, right? to go through that death march of can we get this thing off the ground and get to that high level of AUM so that it survives.
And we did. Hey, so we want to get through these last 10 slides here fairly quickly, but just to drive the point home, going back to an image that Josh had shown earlier, the way that you do this,
so powerful,
right, is you're not spending money in all the wrong places. And I think, Josh, this power of the connected device was another, illustration of that point.
Yeah. So let me tell that real quick. I know we're running short on time, but I love this story too, because again, that graphic on that last slide, I think to me tells it all, right? We're targeting that house in that neighborhood. And that's why we don't need a giant budget. It used to be you wanted to run a national TV ad. Well, you need at least a couple $1 million. Now, literally, we can run a national TV ad for, $10,000, $20,000 a month. It's crazy to a specific target audience. So this one story this cracked me up with, I was over at a friend's house pre-COVID, and he says, "Oh, I want to show you this show that I've really enjoyed." Okay, cool. So we sit down, we watch, and the ads start playing, periodically through Hulu, and I notice we see an ad for pet supply products, and I'm thinking, that's interesting. My buddy doesn't have any pets. Okay, whatever. And then we see a second one, different pet supply product, and then a third one. By the third one, I turn to him and go, "Hey, are you thinking about getting a dog or like looking into it, going to websites, anything like that?" He's like, "No, I don't know. I'm not." And I own 3 dogs. And I'm like, "Have you ever seen these commercials before?" He goes, "No, come think about it, I never have." Well, how did that happen? Cross-device targeting, right? I have been to his house many times. As soon as I walked in, my phone switched over to his Wi-Fi. So suddenly they realized I personally am in that location. So when we watched Hulu, I got targeted at his house with pet supply ads, which just kind of blew my mind. I was like, wow, amazing. Perfect example of how specific that targeting can be.
Nothing drives it home, right, than a real life example. And we've all heard location from, in real estate or in restaurants. But now in the digital space, this is even more so true, right? You've got to be in the right location, at the right time. And so this quote really resonates with us, right? Luck is being in the right place at the right time, but location and timing are to some extent our control. And with programmatic, that is exactly the case, is that you can choose the device, the site, the time, and the location on that digital real estate to make that true. So hopefully we've proven out the point here with the Super Bowl budget. We don't need to spend $2.4 million in trying to get to a oversized audience. And then back to really the promotion that we told people about earlier. If they stick around, this is why that custom specific audience is so important, right? If you build the audience right, if you focus your investments there and you engage with just them, then you can absolutely be a superhero.
Yeah, and just to go back on that real quick, that Super Bowl budget. I know we talked about that one ETF that was recently launched. I think we went from 0 to 100 million in AUM in just a few months, and we didn't have anywhere close to a Super Bowl budget. So, I mean, it really is possible to see pretty amazing numbers if you get your targeting right.
And that is what's so remarkable, and I think for our audience, such a huge relief if they move kind of in this direction. So as we've gone through today, this is why we claim, right? Hit your investment audience right between the eyes and through the heart. Identify them, deliver them, a message like we're seeing those messages for pets and have an affinity for, really nailing them. So Yes, we are calling all of our digital marketing superheroes. But Josh, maybe we should take the audience a little bit through, pull the curtain back even more on what's it going to take to do this.
Yeah, sure. So again, I'll just roll through this really quickly, but our clients range from spending anywhere from tens of thousands to millions in annual ad spend. So maybe an average in that range might be, let's say, 200,000 annually. So if they're spending 200,000 annually, it's about 16,000 a month. And obviously that doesn't get done for free. So, then you've got your if you were going to do this in-house and you were going to pay someone in-house to manage it, you're probably spending about 9,000. Maybe that, let's say that includes health and benefits, probably doesn't, but we'll just say it does. But then you're also going to have ad spend waste unless you have someone who's really familiar with how to build out those audiences and really familiar with this niche. So you kind of have to plan on having that waste.
That example that you shared earlier about the gain of 39% savings.
Yeah, exactly. And that was coming from another agency that was handling programmatic. So that should have probably known a little more of what they were doing. And we found 39% waste in 1 month. And then you also have to plan on testing audiences, because you're going to, you need those premium audience recipes that we've come up with that have kind of been proven to work, so that you can hit the ground running. We leverage that to be much more efficient. So, if you put in a little extra for testing audiences, your total cost, you're looking at, spending maybe 21,000, just about that, for the month, for your, so suddenly your budget really went up, right? You're spending 16,000 on your ad spend, but you're also spending a lot more than that on just managing it.
Right. And we think of, okay, well, I just need to maybe get somebody to manage this, but there's all these other hidden costs essentially from, say, that wasted spend. And even in the testing of the audiences, if we just look at some of these ratios, the wasted spend is about a little bit over a third of what you were already, spending in full for that month. So essentially there's about a third, waste there, and then add on top of that, the testing of this audience. So with that, it's looking like $21,000 a month in order to be able to manage it. So for me, I don't know, Josh, you're asking me to spend more money than I'm actually spending in ad spend. That seems like a little bit of a deal killer, right? If I have to go through and spend all these additional, funds. So what would it, for example, take if, we were to take on an account and manage this for somebody?
Yeah. So, our typical agency fee is, we have a $2,000 a month minimum, and then a percentage of ad spend as it goes above those minimums. But this might be a typical smaller to mid-range budget that we see. And obviously we have budgets that are a lot larger than this too, which is great, because even if you're a small budget, you get to take advantage of all the data we're learning from some of the larger budgets. So yeah, agency fee on this ad spend would be $2,100 a month. Again, like we showed in that illustration, that case study early on, when we took over that one account a while back, we paid for our agency fee for a year and a half in the savings that they got in just the first month. So there really is a difference in who you're getting to manage this.
And you could very quickly, right, be spending 10x on top of doing it yourself. There's actually a question that we got about this, like, what is optimization like for a typical campaign? So could we expect really this amount of savings for say, wasted spend?
Oh yeah. So again, I live on data. I love that stuff. So when we first launch, obviously we're launching usually from a pretty good place, because we have the experience to know, okay, we're going to recommend that you use these target audiences, et cetera. But no matter where we launch from, that establishes our baseline. And then we start, once we get about a month of data, then we start pulling those levers and we look and we go, okay, I want to increase maybe I want to increase my viewability. So making sure that my ads show up, if we're talking display ads, I want to make sure they're showing up above the fold on websites. So I can pull some levers, our team can pull some levers to make sure that we increase the viewability. Well, that increases CTR. And if the click-through rate is increased, then our cost per click starts dropping. And we just keep looking at the specific placements, or maybe it's worth we start seeing a specific placement do really well. Maybe then we start looking into maybe some private offer that will go to that place and say, hey, we want to leverage a private offer and pay less to show up in that same placement. You know, things like that we start going through and just start pulling these levers, and you're going to see that optimization pay off.
So that's a huge disparity in cost between us managing it for somebody and then trying to, you know, navigate these dangerous waters on their own. So we know it's a natural thing. Some of the folks in the audience may want to take that next step after seeing, you know, really how much of a no-brainer this is. And so if you do want to get in touch with us, info@zerocompany.com is the best email to reach us, or our toll-free number. Or if you'd like to visit us through the website, just feel free to fill out the contact us form, and we'll get back to you right away. You know, help answer any questions that you have, or engage at least in a conversation if this makes sense. So Josh, I know there's a few folks that have hung on with us this whole time. Let's help them out. What do we have for them?
Yeah, and I hope it was valuable information. I hope that was helpful. But if you've hung on this long, we do want to provide you with what we promised, which is 3 custom-built programmatic audiences for you and your business specifically. So if you visit the URL that's on the screen, we will get back to you, and we'll probably want to have a little bit of a conversation just to better understand your business, better understand your focus and what your goals are. And then we'll put together for you 3 custom-built programmatic audiences. And, you know, we'll give you the exact data sources. We'll give you everything that we would use to run these audiences, and you can run with them. So take advantage of that. If you want to use them, of course, obviously we hope you use them with us, but if you decide not to and you say, well, I want to try and manage this on my own, or what have you, that's totally up to you. So there really is a value, though, to at least getting those audiences. It really will save you a lot of money in this vertical just because of the experience we have. So I would encourage you at least take advantage of that.
You've got it.
3 audiences.
You've got to explore it. Without, I mean, to go back to just, you know, the angst and doing marketing the way, you know, the old way, you've got to explore some of these new ways. I mean, if you could target those high net worth investors, if you could start to prove that ROI, if you could, you know, maybe increase your budget into the right bucket, and see some more results for that. I mean, who doesn't, you know, want that? And, you know, again, it takes us out of that old world of having to deal with all the struggle and the pain and having to learn things the hard way. So Josh, I think we've got a little bit of time for Q&A. If anyone does have any questions, we've got the chat open. Someone's asking, Josh, real quick, how is programmatic different from Google PPC? I think that's a great one. Kind of.
Yeah. So with Google pay-per-click, you're targeting the people based on their search queries, right? So it's a little more bottom of funnel typically. So that's how you're targeting with Google pay-per-click. With programmatic, you're targeting based on the audience, that actual person. So they might not actually be actively searching for your product, but we are able to get it in front of them at the right place at the right time. So it is a little different. Definitely, we don't recommend doing, you know, just thinking, well, I only want to do PPC or I only want to do programmatic. Ideally, you'd have a total digital marketing strategy and you'd realize, oh, okay, well, here's a part of our budget that we would use for pay-per-click. Here's a part of our budget we'd use for programmatic, et cetera. But yeah, they are definitely different.
And that kind of is related to one of the next questions is, do you recommend that clients shift 100% to programmatic? What would be the right mix?
No, I don't think, not usually. And again, it depends on the circumstances. I'll give you an example where programmatic makes sense that pay-per-click wouldn't, and that is a geofencing situation. So we had a client that ran, you know, I think they had about 50 or 60 pet stores. And they said, hey, we just want to run kind of a one-time programmatic campaign. We're running an event. We're sponsoring this event at these fairgrounds, and we want to target the people who go to the event. So we knew this enough ahead of time. we could set up with a data supply provider that we could geofence those fairgrounds, and then anyone who entered those fairgrounds, we could basically target those people for the next 4 to 8 weeks via video, display, and CTV, because that was geofenced. So could we do that via pay-per-click? No, not a chance. So typically we would recommend doing both, but you definitely have to figure out what are your goals, and then we figure out the strategy that makes the most sense.
And I think just to drive the point home, right, having an agency that kind of can look at all of these different avenues and pull the different levers is a really smart way to go. Another great question we got here, Josh, relates to the time and the length of running the campaign. So how long do you typically, run campaigns? How quickly can you get ramped up even?
I would say typically it's going to be a couple weeks to get us set up. Maybe even, let's say we kind of, I'd say about 2 to 3 weeks for us to go from, okay, we got the go ahead to being launched. We can do it faster if we need to, but I'd say 2 weeks is comfortable for us. And then as far as how long to run them, again, that will vary depending on the goals. Most of our clients run on a continual basis. And, I'd say the best performing clients give us a little bit of flexibility so that when we do see those spikes in interest, we will spike the budget and then we'll come back down based on the trends we're seeing in the marketplace. But we definitely have some that'll say, hey, I only want, the geofencing of the fairgrounds one is a perfect example. Hey, we're only going to run this campaign for 6 to 8 weeks. That makes sense. But in most cases, I would say you would run it continually and just continue to see that growth. Yeah,
and I think another point, I probably should have made this earlier in the presentation, is if anyone in the audience is looking at 4Q spend or is looking at planning for 2021, now seeing the power of what programmatic can do, if you want to essentially assign a slice of that, big or small, in your budget, now is really the right time to do it. So, well, Josh, I think we're at our time. So we want to wrap up. Again, we really want to thank everyone for being here today. Josh, thank you so much for the incredible insights that you've been able to share, and really helping everyone to break through that noise and hit their audience right between the eyes and through the heart, and not have that huge Super Bowl budget.
And then too, I would say too, if we didn't get to your question and you have something you want to chat about, feel free to email us. info@zerocompany.com is probably the easiest one, and it'll get routed to either me or someone else on our team that can answer that question for you. Because it's kind of a unique area that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with, just how much you can do. So there's a lot of potential there, and as a marketer, that's a lot of fun.
All right, that's beautiful. That's a great place to wrap up. Thanks, Josh. See you, everybody.
No problem. Thanks so much. Bye.